It started as just another tense moment on a city street. A white officer, brimming with arrogance, confronted a black man in civilian clothes. The exchange quickly turned heated, and then came an act so shocking it left witnesses stunned. He spat in the man's face. But what the officer didn't know was that this man wasn't just anyone. He was the newly appointed police chief, tasked with bringing reform and unity to a fractured department. The story takes an unexpected turn as this humbling moment unfolds, revealing not just a clash of attitudes, but also a deeper lesson about respect, accountability, and change. How did the new chief respond? What would happen next in a city already grappling with racial tensions and trust issues? This moment was about to redefine more than just one man's career. It would challenge an entire community to rethink its values. Stay tuned. As the crowd around them watched in disbelief, the officer's smug expression remained unchanged. To him, the man he had disrespected was just another face, someone he felt he could intimidate without consequence. But the new police chief stood his ground, his calm demeanor masking the storm brewing inside him. He had just taken on one of the most challenging jobs in the city, stepping into a department plagued by scandals, misconduct, and deep mistrust from the community. This incident was not only personal, it symbolized the very issues he had vowed to confront. What the officer didn't realize was that his new boss was someone who had spent years fighting for justice and accountability, someone who had walked in the shoes of those often overlooked. The question wasn't if the chief would respond, but how. The officer's actions had set the stage for a reckoning no one in that department would forget. Word of the incident spread quickly, both among the onlookers and within the walls of the police department. Whispers echoed in hallways as officers pieced together the shocking revelation. The man the officer had disrespected was their new chief. Some felt uneasy, knowing change was inevitable under his leadership. Others worried what this would mean for a department already under scrutiny. But for the officer involved, it was an entirely different reality. He remained oblivious, unaware that his split-second decision to act out of arrogance had placed him in the center of a storm. Meanwhile, the new chief wrestled with his next move. This wasn't just about personal pride, it was a chance to set an example. He wanted reform, but how could he lead a department where behavior like this had gone unchecked for so long? As he prepared to address the situation, he couldn't help but think, what lesson would truly make a difference? The officer was summoned to the precinct later that day, still unaware of the gravity of the situation. He entered the conference room casually, expecting a routine meeting, but the moment he saw the new police chief seated at the head of the table, his confidence faltered. The realization hit him like a tidal wave. This was the man he had humiliated in public. Silence hung heavy in the room as the chief's steady gaze met the officer's now uneasy expression. Every other officer present seemed to hold their breath, sensing the weight of what was about to unfold. The chief finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. He recounted the incident with precision, ensuring everyone understood the seriousness of what had occurred. Tension thickened as he paused, the room waiting for his next words. Was he about to issue a punishment, make an example of the officer, or take a different path entirely? The answer loomed, electrifying the air. Just as the room braced for the chief's next move, an unexpected knock on the door interrupted the moment. A civilian liaison entered, looking flustered, and handed the chief a file. The chief glanced at the contents, his face remaining unreadable, but his sharp eyes betrayed a flicker of something. Was it anger, or perhaps disappointment? The officer shifted uncomfortably in his seat, sensing this was far from a simple reprimand. The chief set the file down and leaned forward, addressing the entire room. He revealed that the officer in question wasn't just guilty of disrespect during their encounter. The file contained a record of complaints about his behavior, patterns of misconduct that had been swept under the rug for years. Gasps rippled through the room as the chief made it clear this wasn't an isolated incident. Now, it wasn't just about one officer's actions, it was about a system that allowed such behavior to thrive. The chief's voice cut through the tension as he announced his decision. The officer would be placed on immediate suspension pending a full investigation into his past conduct. There was no room for excuses, no opportunity to deflect blame. The chief made it clear that change wasn't just coming, it was about a system that allowed such behavior to thrive. The chief's voice cut through the tension as he announced his decision. The officer would be placed on immediate suspension pending a full investigation into his past conduct. There was no room for excuses, no opportunity to deflect blame. The chief made it clear that change wasn't just coming, it had already begun. For a moment, the officer tried to protest, but the weight of the evidence silenced him. Then, just as it seemed the situation had reached its peak, the chief added one final twist. He pulled out a document that outlined a new policy for the department, mandatory training on bias and accountability, starting with the officer in question. But there was more. In a surprising move, the chief offered the officer a choice: either face the consequences of his actions or join the reform efforts as an example of growth and accountability. The room was stunned. The officer's decision would now determine not just his future, but his legacy in a department on the brink of transformation. The officer sat in silence, the weight of the choice pressing down on him. For the first time, he seemed to truly reflect on his actions and the path that had brought him to this moment. After what felt like an eternity, he quietly agreed to take part in the reform efforts, knowing it was his chance to make amends. The room relaxed slightly, though the chief's stern expression never wavered. This was only the beginning. In the weeks that followed, the department began its transformation. The officer became part of the training programs, confronting uncomfortable truths and working to rebuild trust with the community. The chief's bold approach sent a clear message. Accountability was not optional, and change was possible, even in the most challenging circumstances. As the city watched these changes unfold, it became clear that this moment wasn't just about one man. It was about creating a future of respect, unity, and understanding.